Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, where we will be discussing enterprise data protection in healthcare and life sciences with Commvault and Amazon Web Services. My name is Aaron Friedman, and I will be moderating today's webinar. I'm pleased to be joined by Michael Leonard from Commvault and Dan Hill from Ubistore. And before we begin, I want to let you know that at the end of the presentation, we'll have time for a Q&A. And if you look at the GoToWebinar screen, there's a questions panel, and feel free during any point in today's presentation to ask your questions in there, and we will do our absolute best to answer them all in the Q&A. Should we not get to your question, we will be following up personally after today's webinar to make sure that your inquiries are well addressed. And with that said, there are several key themes that we hope you get out of the next hour. First and foremost, it's how can you optimize data management for your healthcare organization? And along with that, it's how to protect sensitive data from increasingly sophisticated cyber threats, and how you can do so while concurrently reducing your operational costs, even as you increase your data volumes. And before we really dive into today's story, I want to start by talking about broad trends in healthcare. And the overarching theme in the industry, and this is what we're hearing from customers as well, is this fundamental shift from volume-based care to value-based. And at this point today, over 50% of hospital CEOs say that this transition is their biggest financial challenge currently. And core to enabling this transition is increasing operational efficiency, deriving new insights for cheaper, and making sure that patients get the right treatment earlier on in their regimen. And earlier capabilities are rapidly accelerating the generation of new data assets that are valuable to healthcare organizations, such as from clinical genomics, medical imaging, and electronic health records. And at the same time data is exploding, compute power is continuing to increase at a similar rate, making the possibility of computing on these new health data sets a fundamental reality. But all this, of course, needs to be done securely, with a new healthcare organization experiencing a security breach every day. And when you put this all together, a robust data management and security strategy really isn't an option anymore, but rather a necessity. And when we talk to healthcare and life sciences customers about their data challenges, they mostly fall into these 6 buckets you see on the screen. Security and protecting data is of course job zero and paramount when thinking in the context of protected health information, or you may hear it referred to as PHI. And while security is an overarching theme, there are several other key components organizations focus on in their data strategy. They include things like, how do we acquire data from disparate sources? For example, think about remote patient monitoring in hospital beyond the 4 walls. How do we store that data in a way that is meaningful for downstream consumption? How do we process that ever-expanding healthcare data in a way that's efficient? How can we analyze these data sets at scale, say via population health management, to generate new insights? And how can we distribute data in a manner that has fine-grained access control, security, and logging, as well as is easily consumed by stakeholders no matter where they may be? And, in reality, right, these challenges are not specific to healthcare organizations. When we at AWS talk to customers across industries, whether it's healthcare or financial services, media and entertainment, oil and gas, you name it, we hear these same themes time and again. And really, that's what we think about when we talk about this data value chain. It's fundamentally a set of common challenges and opportunities that our customers face with regards to their overall data strategy. And of course, right, we recognize every industry is unique, but we can always learn from, say, a use case in financial services and apply the learnings from that use case to better serve our healthcare and life sciences customers. And when we talk to healthcare customers, several themes emerge about what they're doing and what they want to do in the cloud. We recognize, of course, every healthcare organization has a different stage of cloud adoption and maturity, and we're here to help them no matter where they may be. And often the first conversation that we have with customers is around storage and archiving, as every organization in healthcare particularly requires a sound business continuity and disaster recovery plan. Core operations such as hospitals ERP, clinical information systems, and population health analytics, in addition to myriad other healthcare workloads, are really well adapted to the cloud, and we're seeing many customers find success by running these applications on AWS, both in terms of increasing their operational efficiency as well as doing so securely and adhering to their regulatory requirements no matter where they may be. They find, right, they can reduce costs, they can increase their service level agreements, provide increased value to their patients, and generate those critical health insights faster. And core to the success, if you look at these 6 buckets, and there are many more, such as, say, medical imaging, but, core to these, these buckets and others, the success of many healthcare organizations is tied to our phenomenal group of ISVs and systems integrators who are building the next generation software in each of these healthcare categories. But in today's webinar, we're really zeroing in on storage and archiving and how healthcare customers can achieve their BCDR objectives on top of AWS. Such a workload, follows similar steps no matter the healthcare customer. Data, whether it's patient records, images, or even handwritten notes, really gets ingested in a standard process, and it's tagged so that it is easily retrievable by downstream systems. And often where this data is stored, of course, it can go into a database, but often we're seeing more and more customers really use Amazon S3, which is our massively scalable object store that's really built to store and retrieve any amount of data from anywhere and retrieve it as you need it. S3 also provides comprehensive security compliance capabilities, which are really essential for healthcare organizations. And when we look at the tool sets that enable these are things like storage access policies and encryption at rest and in transit. And of course, healthcare data about an individual is longitudinal, and much of that healthcare data can be uploaded and archived over time. And as we provide native capabilities to facilitate offloading these data to Amazon Glacier, our long-term secure and durable object storage for data archiving. And while there are AWS services that help facilitate this whole process, one of the key ways we're seeing our healthcare customers achieve success in storage and archiving is working with our AWS Partner Network storage competency partners. And today I'm thrilled to hand it over to Michael Leonard of Commvault and really hear about how Commvault is enabling healthcare organizations.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and Dan and our audience today about enterprise data protection in the cloud and the case study that Dan will be covering as well. For those of you that don't know Commvault, we are the leading enterprise data protection solution in the market today. We have a long track record of helping our customers protect and manage their data using our data management platform. And over the past several years, with our partnership with AWS, we've been assisting our customers with their transition to the cloud. And we'll talk about what that means today also. Now, it's not just us saying that we're a leading provider. We are ranked very highly by Gartner and Forrester, and they have positioned us as leaders. But more importantly, our customers' results help make the case as well. IDC recently ran a survey across hundreds of our customers, and across several key categories, our customers benefited greatly by working with Commvault, as you can see. So as you look at the benefits on the left side of the slide, you see that these results translate into real business impact for our customers and how they run their businesses more efficiently with less downtime and at a lower cost than other alternatives they might have. I also wanted to spend a little time just touching on a few other industry forces that are also impacting healthcare business decisions. I'll bounce around a little bit here, and I won't touch on every single one in order. But when we hear about the challenges on this slide, we're also going to hear some similarities with the case study that Ubistore will cover, that Dan will cover a little bit later. And you'll see that the customer is facing many of these same challenges that are really impacting all of the healthcare providers and payers and medical device organizations. So as you sort of move through this, you can see that whether it's business consolidation, enabling clinical and business analytics, data security issues, regulatory and compliance challenges they might be facing, all of these areas are impacting the healthcare providers and payers in today's environment. Now, I mentioned the Commvault data management platform, and to sort of explain a little bit about that, our platform is built as a single solution, which is very modular in how it's built out and utilized. So in using our framework, Commvault has created additional healthcare-related solutions that leverage our core data management capabilities. So in the diagram, we can see that we're focused on several key areas of data management for our healthcare customers, specifically how we would protect EHR or other clinical data, helping organizations manage medical images, genomics, digital pathology, all the way across their enterprise, helping migrate data around and between different facilities and out to the cloud eventually at many locations, and also migrating from legacy IT systems. And then finally, providing insight into where PHI may reside in the platform. And I'll talk about that a little bit more as we move on. Now you can see down the bottom of the slide, that actually translates into many different use cases that our customers can focus on and use our solution to help them enable in their organizations, whether it's helping to back up our archived medical image data, and image enable an EHR, enable analytics, and I'll talk about that a little bit in more detail as we move on as well. Another area of focus for us is EHR and clinical application data protection. And in this situation, we're leveraging automation capabilities that we've developed for snapshot management and applying them to protecting clinical applications. This approach is more efficient for both backing up applications as well as restoring applications very rapidly. We're delivering a very powerful set of tools here, and it simplifies the backup and recovery process, and it obviously helps minimize downtime. And by automating it, it makes it a lot easier for organizations to be prepared if they have any issues with their infrastructure. Now, we also, from a medical imaging perspective, are focused on different methods in how we can help our customers protect medical imaging data. So in the world of medical imaging, replication had been a very common model for data protection, but at Commvault, we feel that really doesn't go far enough to ensure that medical imaging data is thoroughly protected. We feel that replication alone is probably not a good enough answer to help deliver the peace of mind that really a more comprehensive data protection solution would be able to offer. With all the threats that have become commonplace over the past several years, things like malware and stuff like that, organizations really need to think through additional levels of data protection so that from a replication perspective, you're not stuck if you have an issue that is replicated from one location to another, or one system to another. Now, from an enterprise image management perspective, we have a number of different ways that we can help our customers, whether it's purely backing up imaging data, acting as an archive target where they can interact with our platform and manage that data as their archive tier, helping to migrate data between different storage locations or even between different applications, or even acting as a clinical archive to help centralize the management of medical imaging data across the organization. Additionally, we can help organizations manage their genomics data. And we've put together a solution that helps from a workflow perspective move genomics data from primary storage down into our platform into less expensive but very accessible storage, which helps then manage that data whether you're storing it on-prem or out in the cloud as shown here. And that also allows researchers to share their data with other users, whether it's inside or outside of their organization. So the platform is able to really provide a policy-driven management solution, and it keeps the data obviously in a very secure location, both on-prem or in the cloud, and you're able to keep track of all of the different data from the various research projects or departments that may be utilizing genome sequencing. And finally here, I just wanted to make the point that our platform has been developed to be very open. So what that means from the customer's perspective is that the data is very accessible and that it opens up many different possibilities for how third-party analytics can be applied to the data under management in the platform. So we use the term our customers can activate their data because what that means is they're able to make use of their data in the way they see fit using the tools that they want to bring to bear against that data. So with that, there are many different ways that they can approach it. And now finally, I'll turn it over to Dan so that he can walk us through the customer case study.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's much appreciated. For everyone who doesn't know who Ubistore is, we are a managed service provider based in the Chicago area. We specialize in backup and disaster recovery as a service. This case study is based upon a healthcare payer that is a large nonprofit health plan organization that has about 1,000 employees and 440,000 members. They needed to lower costs by moving a large part of their infrastructure to the cloud. The organization elected to migrate most of its application data to Amazon Web Services to optimize data center space, manage business more efficiently, and benefit from a lower total cost of ownership. The organization's previous backup and recovery solution had proven unable to keep up with demand. Appliances were well overloaded since data was inefficiently deduplicated. Adding to the further frustration was the fact that the old solution was unable to execute granular backups for their Oracle databases, which required frequent full backups because of that. So Ubistore went through an extensive assessment and design process in order to come up with a list of the healthcare payer's objectives. And what we came out with was that they wanted to exit from traditional legacy backup and DR services. An example of that would be backing up to tape and having a cold site infrastructure at a second data center for disaster recovery. They also wanted to leverage the cloud, leverage a cloud provider with flexible multi-cloud options, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service models. They also wanted to free up IT personnel so that they can focus on more critical business operations by leveraging a managed service provider that had subscription-based MSP licensing, such as Commvault, and combine that with infrastructure as a service for a next generation backup and disaster recovery solution. One of the key things is they weren't happy with their RPOs and RTOs, the recovery time and recovery point objectives for their healthcare systems. So that was key, as well as ultimately they wanted to reduce their costs. They were spending a lot of money, and they wanted a much improved budget management. And that's where really the cloud providers and the managed service model and the software as a service model comes into play, as well as they wanted to become more agile to get ahead of the healthcare data analytics initiatives. We met these objectives by using dedicated hardware on premise for a very short-term retention and replicated short and long-term retention to the customer's AWS infrastructure, basing the pricing all on a per terabyte model, giving them the ability to flex up and down with all the components, regardless of what it was. We focused in on data security, making sure that the data was protected and encrypted during transit and at rest, regardless of whether it was stored on site for the short term or in the different storage platforms within AWS. We assigned a technical account manager, and they built out Commvault reporting to help them pass internal audits and For service level agreements, we had to prove as a managed service provider we were doing our job to them. As far as that Oracle backup issue, specific Oracle short-term backup data is replicated to Amazon EBS from their on-premise location to facilitate faster restores before moving to Amazon S3 and eventually to Amazon Glacier for long-term cost-saving storage. What that accomplished, what is it allowed us to do restores for the short-term retention for those Oracle databases right out of EBS for faster restores into Amazon Compute for disaster recovery. The most important part here is we saw a data deduplication capacity savings of up to 90% from an application size of approximately 900 terabytes. This was allowing the customer to reduce the data storage costs, move data to AWS very efficiently from on-premise, and meet a 24-hour SLA for moving data off-site. That data deduplication capability by Commvault was key to that. We then developed an archive policy that freed up expensive primary disk space by leveraging Commvault converged processes for backup and archiving in conjunction with AWS. We took a good look at running Commvault utilities against the data sets that were candidates for archive, and we discovered that 80% of the data hadn't been touched in 5 years or more. So we created storage policies and archive policies to accommodate freeing up very expensive, in this particular case, the customer was using very expensive pure storage as primary disk. So the final financial impact to the customer was great. The results of the project resulted in a 48% annual cost savings while increasing security. Backup and recovery performance increased. We see 99% success rate on backups. They have even received a couple of price decreases from AWS for compute and storage resources, adding to the cost savings. So basically, this is a high-level drawing of the infrastructure. Ubistore built a secure VPN tunnel into the customer's environment. We managed the environment from a Commvault process perspective. All the Commvault infrastructure gets managed down to the hard drive levels. We react on backup failures for the customer. But the key part is getting that data offsite, meeting service level agreements, and utilizing the proper storage policies to make sure the data moves from storage tier to storage tier within AWS to ultimately save the customer the most money. So with the deployment of Commvault, the organization now has improved operational expense model, full integration with AWS, and improved security capabilities. So with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to Mike, who is going to discuss the Commvault's integration with the cloud.
Great, thank you, Dan. I really appreciate you walking us through that. The customer use case is very compelling, and you were able to help them solve a number of challenges and not only improve how they do business, but help them do it much more cost effectively. So thank you for sharing that. So I wanted to just touch on these areas to make sure everybody sort of understands how Commvault is able to support our customers' transition to the cloud, specifically with Amazon. And I'll take a little time to sort of walk through the various offerings and then how we make that happen. So from our single platform, we're able to offer these different capabilities, which as you go across, move from strictly backing up data out to the cloud, performing disaster recovery in the cloud, and migrating data to the cloud. And we'll go through each of these and touch on each one. Commvault was really one of the earliest vendors from a backup and recovery perspective to natively integrate with a cloud storage platform like AWS. And we're really the only enterprise class data management solution that'll let you take full advantage of cloud capabilities without any additional infrastructure, right? Everything is built in natively to our platform, And so from a software perspective, we make it very easy to interact with the cloud, whether that's literally to move data up to the cloud, back up to the cloud, or even run up in the cloud. So that makes it much more simple and cost effective to work with Commvault to help you in that transition out to AWS, just as Dan was talking about in that case study. Now, beyond backup to the cloud, when you've taken workloads and migrated them into the cloud, or even native workloads that run in the cloud, we can help protect those workloads as well in the cloud. So we're able to help you with disaster recovery within the cloud and in between different regions of the cloud. So you're able to use this as a platform for disaster recovery, not only for some of your tier 1 workloads, but your tier 2 or tier 3 workloads as well. And not knowing where you all are in your journey to the cloud, you may have already started to move some of your workloads to the cloud. And what we have are tools that can actually make that process easier. So if you've been challenged by some of the activities and planning that it takes to move data to the cloud, we have many different tools that can actually help you accelerate that movement to the cloud. And you may be moving backup data to the cloud and then restoring it in the cloud and having those applications run in the cloud in those sorts of environments. So we're able to help with all of these different scenarios and many more. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of points related to how Commvault does integrate with AWS. And in terms of our integration with AWS, we offer a full range of capabilities for helping to move data out to the cloud and manage data within that cloud. We're very capable of helping with that transition, and as a result of that, we're able to deliver a very cost-effective solution that helps you manage your data back and forth between an on-premise model and a cloud-based model. So we help you across in between your on-premise and cloud-based infrastructure as well. So as Dan started to mention, we also support S3, S3IA, Glacier, Snowball, and we're able to provide policy-based data movement between your on-premise storage and AWS. So there's a very good view for the users in terms of where your data is, how you're moving it, and sort of where it is once you move it over into AWS. So the solution is, it's delivering very tightly integrated alerting, reporting, tracking, and verification that the data has been moved over into the cloud, and that you can be comfortable that everything you want to move has been moved. And obviously, as was mentioned, AWS is highly scalable and reliable cloud storage. So we've helped customers move a tremendous amount of data over to the cloud. All right. So the only point I wanted to make on this slide, because I know we're going to be pressed for time, is that this really shows how Commvault can, with our policy management engine, help you manage data across multiple locations, as I mentioned, on-prem and out in the cloud. So our platform is very flexible in terms of being able to run across multiple locations and give you a view of all and access to all of that data, regardless of where it resides. So you sort of get this overlay view of all the information, all the data that's being protected, and you're able to then orchestrate the movement of that data out to the cloud and back on-prem as needed. As I mentioned, if you are orchestrating that movement of data out to the cloud for backup purposes, you can perform disaster recovery operations in the cloud and bring applications back up in the cloud as well. So all of these capabilities help lead to the ability to better manage your costs, reduce your risks, and increase the business value of the solution by combining Commvault with AWS. So the platform, as I said, can be leveraged on-prem and in the cloud. And I think that's a really important point to make at this point. One point I want to make for the healthcare customers that are on the line is that we've seen a tremendous change in the stance of healthcare organizations in working with cloud providers. And we've seen, as this is referencing here, that the shift to the cloud is happening more rapidly each year. And as you can see, the move away from on-premise data centers is starting to pick up speed. And we also see that with our customers, we've helped our customers move over 250 petabytes of data to the cloud over the past couple of years, and the annual rate is really increasing year over year. We're seeing a large uptake year over year. It's definitely not linear. It's grown in a tremendous curve. So the point there is that we have a tremendous amount of experience with healthcare providers and service providers and healthcare payers to help them with that transition to more of a cloud-based model. That concludes my portion of the presentation, and I think now we'll move on to take questions.
Thank you so much, Michael and Dan. And we have a couple slides just before we conclude. First off, of course, coming up in a couple weeks is Commvault Go, and for those of you who will be there, we'd be very enthusiastic to talk. I know obviously Commvault will be there, and there will be some great content focused on healthcare and life sciences. And here we go. All right, perfect. So we're now going to move into the Q&A session, and thank you for putting in some questions, and want to start with some of them that have been coming in. First off, we will be getting a copy. We will be sending out a copy of the presentation following this the conclusion of today's webinar. So don't worry, we will be sending it out, just addressing one of the questions in the comments. The first one to come in, it's really for both Michael and Dan, and just sort of walking through at a high level how it is to connect from the on-premises environment to AWS. Sort of walk through that overall process.
Hey, Aaron, it's Mike. It's actually a very straightforward process. All of our storage management is policy-based, so it's as easy as going to a pull-down menu, entering your credentials for your AWS account, and then setting up a policy to say you want to start moving data or files over to AWS. It is a very straightforward and easy process to manage.
Excellent. And Dan, do you have anything to add, or we can move to the next question as well?
Well, I mean, if there's, at a different level, there's always you can always add a direct connect if you're looking for large amounts of bandwidth directly to AWS. In this particular use case, the customer had a gigabit direct connect out to AWS. So that was very helpful.
Great, yeah, and then for those who aren't familiar, Direct Connect is AWS's sort of direct line from your on-premises data center or corporate IT environment to AWS. The next question I'm going to take is regarding, it says, does the AWS cloud services offer HIPAA protection without using Commvault? So this comes back to sort of a shared responsibility model. So what AWS does, right, or any type of provider, is provide security of the cloud so that you can be secure in the cloud. And by that, we offer a slew of what we call HIPAA-eligible services that you can use to store, process, and transmit protected health information. The services with which we discussed today, primarily Amazon S3 and Amazon Glacier, are HIPAA-eligible services. And you have the capability to then, effectively meet your obligations under the business associates agreement with AWS, and then build on top of that to conform to the additional HIPAA requirements as set forth in the security and privacy rules. The next question coming in is for Michael. And, so Michael, I know at the beginning you were talking a bit about some of the broad use cases that healthcare customers are using Commvault for. And one of the ones was related to that slide around PACS and PACS backup. And it was, can Commvault serve as a VNA and make images available throughout our enterprise?
Yeah, so we can act as a centralized archive for medical images, whether they're migrated into us, cleaned up on the way in, and we become that centralized archive, or we'll also be able to handle any new studies that are coming into those different PACS systems, and then ultimately become the archive tier for them, or even a DR tier, depending on the scenario. We can sort of be that centralized hub. And as mentioned, if it's an individual PAC system, we can certainly be the archive target for that as well. So there's a number of different ways we can interact with that imaging data.
And along with that, there is a follow-up question around the lines of, is there any service provided by AWS for querying and retrieving data from PAC systems? So AWS itself, today, we don't have a medical imaging retrieval system, whether it's a full-fledged PAC or a vendor-neutral archive. And that's when we work with, as I talked about at the beginning, our great group of ISV partners, for example, to help them build their PAC systems or VNA systems on top of AWS. Let's see, the next one is asking around, this is for Dan, around Ubistore, and sort of how does, and perhaps it's worth a follow-up conversation, but around the lines of Ubistore's billing model, how you work with customers beyond this particular case study.
We can create any type of pricing model the customer wants. So in this particular case, we created different price points for different types of data storage. So if they wanted to back up locally and replicate off-site, we had a different price point for if they just wanted to back up like dev data locally and not send it to AWS, or if they just wanted to send it to directly to AWS. We can convert. Every solution always consists of, most of the time, hardware on-premise, implementation, assessment and design, a cloud component, and ongoing managed services. And we can, any piece of that can be converted to CapEx, and or the whole thing can be OpEx. So we're very flexible with our pricing strategies. It all depends upon the customer use case.
Great, and this one's for Michael. What third-party analytics tools do you integrate with?
Great question. There's a number of them. I wouldn't say there's a complete list, because the more folks that bring additional analytics applications to us, the longer that list gets. But things like Qlik, Tableau, and a few others have all been used. It's a pretty standard way to connect into the platform, and there's actually a number of ways to connect in. So I wouldn't say it's limited to any set list of analytics providers. It's more if they're able to leverage industry standards for connecting in, they should be able to connect in. But we'd be happy to talk to anybody if they had a specific application they were curious about.
Great, and also for you, Michael, what hardware infrastructure does Commvault support? Particularly, we talked about the AWS standpoint, but what about on-premises?
So Commvault is known for being very open in terms of the hardware providers we work with. We have reference architectures with all of the major vendors right across the board, whether you're talking about Dell or IBM or Cisco. You can get into some of the other white box vendors as well. So we have all this online, and it's posted in terms of the different solutions, different hardware solutions we support. But we're generally going to make the statement that we're pretty agnostic in terms of the hardware that our system can run on.
And with regards to that, what are the primary use cases, right? So we talked about a lot today, but what are the primary use cases for the cloud among the healthcare customers you're working with?
So I would say that, well, first let me say that our healthcare customers, I think, have been a little slower to move to the cloud, but we're starting to see that pick up, which is great. I referenced some of those numbers in terms of, how many hundreds of petabytes have started to be moved by our customers up to the cloud. What we see is that customers will, sort of test the waters a little bit, if you will, and they'll start to move some backup data out to the cloud. And then over time, the volume of data that they move for backup purposes increases. And then they start to play with some of the DR capabilities and sort of see how that goes. So that transition across that slide that I showed from moving backup data into the cloud, potentially doing DR in the cloud, or even then running applications in the cloud, it sort of progresses in a similar fashion. And I think what Dan was talking about in terms of getting some of those applications moved out to the cloud over time, right? They weren't going to start with that immediately, but that was part of the plan. That's a pretty common model we see with our healthcare customers. And again, the rate of adoption is definitely picking up.
Yeah, and that's something we're, from AWS side, something we're seeing as well, right? So the idea of the first step is to get your data assets in. And once you do, we're starting to see really amazing things with how organizations, whether it be, ISVs, SaaS companies, or individual, healthcare providers or payers, really once their data is in AWS, begin to sort of untrap that data and build, sort of net new capabilities to really address that volume to value transition we highlighted early on. So I think with that, we will need to close out today's webinar. I want to thank you again for coming. And if we weren't able to answer your question during today's Q&A, someone from our side or Commvault or UBStore will be following up with you after today's presentation. And again, I just want to say thank you on behalf of myself and Michael and Dan for joining today, and have a wonderful rest of your day and evening.